Good afternoon to all those of you joining us today for our latest analyst briefing. This is primarily a European-based audience, and we will give everyone a minute or two to join us. In the meantime, I'll switch off the various things making weird noises. Okay, cool. Cool, we'll let people join us, but we'll have a slow start to make sure we try and stick to the time contract, so to speak. So yes, good afternoon to everyone joining us today for our analyst briefing, which is based on our most recent report, which we launched at VIVE 2023, the US Health System Conference in the US. This year it was in Nashville. Next year it'll be in Los Angeles. As people join us, we'll just go through some of the housekeeping, let's say. I'm Julian de Salaberry. I'm the CEO and the founder of Galen Growth. I'm located in Switzerland alongside Sarah Schmachtenberg, who is with me today and is our head of research and analytics for the US and Europe. Galen Growth, for those of you who don't know us, although I imagine if you've joined us today, you do know us, but just to, I guess, reinforce the message, we are the most trusted digital health intel and insights firm. We work with a great deal of blue chip clients from the pharmacos, medical device, insurance, large business consulting firms, sell side banks, pure tech, big tech, and the list goes on. We have global reach, office in Singapore to service our Asia-Pac based clients, office in Basel, Europe to service our European clients, and one in Chicago to service our North America based clients. Everything that we do and everything you hear today, for example, is powered by Altec Alpha, which we built in-house to answer a pretty clear pain point, and that is that there is no data source out there that suitably covers and catalogs digital health across the globe and provides the answers to most critical digital health, critical due diligence questions. So it is now, after the last few years of building Altec Alpha, the world's leader in digital health, private market data, intel, and insights, and it's used by, as I said, industry, investors, and startups. It is also supported by an unmatched expert team of which Sarah is a member. So today, US health systems and the digital health achievements to date. It's a baseline, it's the first ever baseline of US health systems and what they're actually doing in digital health. It is, I guess if you look at the Fin version, which is double-sided and beautifully graphic designed by the Fin team, who are masters at the PR, it becomes a 30-page report, but I guess we started with a 60-page report because it was all single-sided and PowerPoint. It is free to download. So if you haven't yet downloaded, please do so. And it's our usual scope of focus for us is digital health only, in accordance with our industry standard now, taxonomy. And it's all ventures incorporated after 2002, that they are private and that they operate in Asia-Pac or Middle East or West Europe or North America or South America. And we look at the ecosystem through the lens of the venture and then therefore work out who they have been partnering with or who's invested in them. Anyway, hence the analysis. And the analysis, of course, goes way beyond funding, which is why they are regarded as industry go-to reference analysis documents these days. So, Sarah, welcome. I think everybody on this call knows you, and I've introduced you already. So let's skip to the chase. And I'll start with the obvious question. This is a US health system report. So why is this important to European digital health leaders and decision makers?
Thank you, Julian, for the introduction. I'm happy to be here. Welcome to everyone. Your question, yeah, well, we started looking into U.S. health systems, and my next point will bring me to your question exactly. But let me give a little bit of motivation why we decided to jump into US health systems. When we looked at all the ventures globally, right, we see that there's a lot of partnerships and the partnerships are growing, right? The number of partnerships across the globe. We focus directly on US ventures, and usually we talk about partnerships between pharma, partnerships between insurance companies, right? Too often health systems and hospitals get overlooked, but the reality is 31% of the partnerships last year in 2022 were with healthcare providers and health systems. So this is a huge topic, especially in the US, but also we found across the globe, the partnerships, and they're growing at a very fast rate. Now the bar chart is showing you not only in the US, where you see a very high, actually a 2x jump from 2021 to 2022, in the number of partnerships announced with US health systems, but also for the rest of the world, we saw an even larger jump, right? We saw a jump of more than 2x of the partnerships announced between digital health ventures and hospitals and health systems. So that was part of our motivation for this this report in itself, along with, I think what you're going to talk about is why health systems need digital health solutions. So anyway, so a little bit of background. Now, when we move to Europe and the rest of the globe, looking a little bit about why is it important to the ventures here in Europe? Well, first of all, if we're looking from the digital health, from the venture point of view, right? The share of partnerships with health systems by venture location, right? If you're looking at the venture, where's the venture founded? Actually, but not necessarily the headquarters, they may have moved, but where's that venture founded? And the share of partnerships with health systems, you'll see 43% in North America, 40% Asia Pacific, but 13% of digital health partnerships are with ventures that are located in Europe, right? So it's a very significant portion of those partnerships are happening with ventures located here in Europe. And then looking at US health systems in particular, right? Ventures in the Western European countries, right, which is the focus of our Galen Growth Health Tech Alpha platform, right? Ventures in Western Europe, when they partner with health systems, 14% of those health systems are actually in the US, right? So they're having to go outside of Europe, or they're able to go outside of Europe, you can look at it either way, in order to get those health system partnerships, right? Which is a significant portion of their pie for partnerships. You see, within the US, mostly the ventures stay within the US, with the exception of 5%. Asia Pacific is the same. I think there's only 6% of the ventures go outside of Asia. Asia Pacific ventures go outside of Asia Pacific in order to partner with health systems. But European ventures and then Middle Eastern ventures is even more pronounced. They do go outside of their own region in order to find those partnerships. Excuse me. Looking back, bringing our focus back now to the US, if we look at just US health systems, they are going global in order to find partners, right? Of course, their focus is in North America, right? 580 of the ventures they're partnering with are located in North America, which includes Canada and Mexico, but here there aren't any partnerships at the moment announced with Mexican ventures. But 48 of those ventures are in Europe. You see 47 Asia Pacific, 18 in the Middle East. So there's definitely a lot of action going on outside of the borders of the US. That's what's so important and interesting for European ventures and health systems here in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any digital health venture looking to scale beyond their immediate domestic market, where they have presumably proven their product market fit and started generating clinical data and no doubt secure some funding, will look at the US invariably as their next base to grow, which is why when you look at their market entry strategy for the US, I would fully expect US health systems to be clearly on their radar. And if it isn't, then they should add it. But more importantly, hopefully they can understand from this data that US health systems are very open to looking at the innovation of European digital health ventures and trying to figure out how to adapt them within their own value chain.
And Julia, maybe you can tell us, you were at Vive a couple of weeks ago. What are the main takeaways? What do US health systems need? Why are they looking, and why do they need to partner with digital health ventures?
Yeah, listen, it was fascinating to be at Vive all the way in Nashville, and I note from one of our guests is from the HLTH team in Europe, whom I met up with whilst I was there. Listen, Vive is the gathering of CTOs, CDOs, and CIOs of US health systems, among many others, but they're kind of the core, the center of gravity of the event. And so conversations with those key decision makers was fascinating. I guess the first message is that US health systems are extremely keen to engage digital health ventures, particularly those that have some traction, some proof to them. We'll come back to that. They have come out of COVID with some challenges they're having to address. And so Q1 of this year, which doesn't really come to an end, but I mean, I guess we were there at Vive and it was kind of towards the end of Q1. So they were describing Q1 as very, very pivotal for them, where they've been really doubling down, evaluating how digital health solutions are able to help them execute their strategic goals going forwards. And we'll come back to that in a minute. From our discussions with many of the US health systems representatives who were there at Vive, they really are looking at ways to be more efficient, more effective, and more productive. And so if you were to try and crystallize that to let's say the 4 or 5 key focus areas that they are focused on and where digital health has relevancy, the first one is around the one I just mentioned, the improvement of profitability. And they're, of course, typically looking at digital payment systems, for example, to really try and take margin out of, or loss margin, let's say, in terms of the transaction and the payment costs, etc. They are extremely keen to mitigate labor shortage and burnout. The labor costs have gone through the roof for them. And so they won't be able to change that piece. You can't just simply create new nurses. You can't just simply import new nurses from other parts of the world because everyone really is suffering the same sort of challenges. But what you can do is look after your existing workforce. And so it's interesting to hear the number of these leaders of health systems really looking at wellness solutions, mental health solutions, prevention solutions that they can use with their own cohort of medical professionals to help them weather through the storm. They're really keen on augmenting patient engagement, and so that's patient messaging. It's all those type of elements that help patients, not just post or outpatients, but also patients that regularly come through the system to be able to engage with that particular health system, for example. Increasingly, and we hear this in Europe as well, which is why I think it's particularly relevant, it is this whole business of health at home model. How do you take the patient out of the hospital, taking up a whole bed, and put them back in their own comfort zone, their own home, but still benefit from the same care? And models such as teleconsultation, all forms of telehealth for that matter, of a keen interest to US health systems, CTOs and CDOs, for example. And of course, there's this constant and continued look at how do they improve awareness around health, how they improve access to health, and how do they improve affordability of healthcare for all stratas of society. And there, of course, they're looking at solutions such as remote patient monitoring, etc. So overall, hopefully everyone gets a sense that US health systems are very much looking at digital health. It's no longer a chit-chat in the corner of something fancy and fun to play with. It is clearly core to strategy. Those are some of the key strategic focus areas that they're doubling down on and really evaluating solutions to see which ones they can pull into their value chain.
Mm-hmm. And I think I will come back to these 6 points that you've just made later when we look at actually the solutions that they are, where we see the partnerships, right, in digital health. But before we do that, let me give a picture of how we look at health systems. What are health systems doing? And there are some very interesting characteristics. that I'd like to talk about. First of all, we looked into two different groups of health systems in the US. One are the top 10 largest health systems, right? This is from Becker's Health Review or Becker's Hospital Review. They ranked, okay, who are the top 10 by the number of hospitals, right? And what we found is that those top 10 are really large corporations that have a lot of hospitals, especially located in rural areas within the US, right? So they have a lot of hospitals, but what we saw is the average size of their portfolio was 13 ventures, right? They're not really that active. You can imagine rolling out a digital health solution across more than 100 hospitals, more than 100 rural hospitals that aren't particularly tech savvy, right? You could start to understand, okay, this is why perhaps they have smaller average portfolios. Second group, of course, the top 10 most active health systems, right? These are hospitals and health systems because the number one in that group is Mayo Clinic. And we actually didn't look at the Mayo Clinic health system. We just looked at Mayo Clinic by itself. So, and in that, the top 10 most active health systems, you get a lot into the research hospitals, right? The university hospitals, the ones that are doing a lot more, I don't want to say experimental, because of course they're hospitals, they can't experiment, right? But they have a lot more resources to do research and to partner with new solutions and spend time with new solutions, right? So you have these two really different buckets, and you have more than a 2.1x portfolio size difference between these two buckets of health systems. So it's really interesting. And what we found is that really only 10 health systems within the US had a venture portfolio of more than 15 ventures, right? Those are, of course, within the top 10 most active. A couple of the two of the health systems the largest health systems had more than 15 ventures in the portfolio. But it's really telling as to what's the current status of health systems and their interactions with digital health. Here we're talking about, as a reminder, private digital health venture partnerships, right? Not the corporations, not partnering with Google, right, to bring more technology into the hospitals. This is looking at digital health ventures. Okay, so within these two different buckets or two different classes, more or less, of health systems, right? And it's important if you're looking to partner with health systems that you understand there are very different characteristics. The top 10 largest health systems, if you're looking at the bar chart, their main focus was in ventures that have solutions in treatment and adherence, as well as ventures for infrastructure, right? Treatment adherence is pretty clear, right? It's diagnosis tools, it's patient solutions, including digital therapeutics, disease management, right? And diagnosis, the 2.5, which you see, that includes the teleconsultation, right? So that also is very present. The infrastructure is looking at their EHR systems, right? Is looking at their health management systems and their IT infrastructure. So that's where you see the focus areas of the large health systems. Whereas the most active health systems, diagnosis, of course, took the top spot as far as not only teleconsultation, but also diagnosis tools, using artificial intelligence. And then you see the last bar, the dark blue bar, which got some attention in the top 10 largest health systems. But here for the most active health systems, this is the research bar, right? So actively participating in clinical trials research and a lot of bioinformatics, right? Producing the data and using that data for diagnosis or for research purposes, right? So again, very different characteristics when you look at the top 10 largest health systems compared to the most active. We can now, looking at the most active health systems, right? The top was Mayo Clinic, and we'll jump into that in just a minute. But the second, number 2 was Mount Sinai Health System with 34 partnerships. And what you see is 24% of their partnerships are outside of the US. So they definitely are active with ventures outside the US. You see somewhat of the distribution, right, of their portfolio, with only 3% in prevention, which, by the way, let me go back. what's 0 in the top 10 largest health systems, and average of 0, right? And average of 1 in the top 10 most active health systems are the prevention and wellness solutions, right? Julian mentioned before, if they may have a wellness solution in their portfolio, and that's to use for their own employees, right? There isn't an emphasis on prevention for their patients, right? Prevention and wellness for their patients. We haven't seen it yet. And that's something we hope will come, but at the moment in the portfolios, it's more or less absent. Mount Sinai has 3% of the portfolios focused on prevention, 30% diagnosis, treatment, 15 infrastructure is 33, and then research is 18%. Right? Now, of course, we can look at their portfolio and do analysis based on the quality and characteristics of the ventures within that portfolio. And doing that, what we see is the alpha score, which is our measure of venture maturity. The average alpha score for the Mount Sinai portfolio is 69, which that's going on a scale from 30 to 100. So 69 is hitting an average venture maturity where they have likely multiple products on the market. The ventures have multiple products on the market and are in more of a growth stage, right? So that's approximately what it means when we talk about an average alpha score of 69. The team score, and if you look in the detailed report, we're not going to go into it today, but you can see the team score is looking at their executive team and the experience, the education levels, and previous venture experience of their executive team. Their team score averages 55. So most ventures or most health systems were partnering with actually a more experienced executive team. We could flip that around and say ventures with an experienced executive team tended to have a lot of partnerships with health systems. Mm-hmm. Let's jump into, because we're here with a European audience, into the Mayo Clinic. I can't jump into it. So I'll have to get out. There we go. If we jump into the Mayo Clinic portfolio quickly within Health Tech Alpha, our digital health platform, we can actually look at what European ventures are they partnering with. And I'm going to quickly log in because otherwise we can't. You only have a limited number of information. If most of you on the call should probably have your Health Tech Alpha account by now in order to download the report. If you don't, I highly recommend you get an account. So what I've done is taken the Mayo Clinic portfolio and filtered it for Europe. And what we find are the 5 ventures that the Mayo Clinic has announced partnerships within Europe, right? 2 of those partnerships were many years ago, and then just recently they announced a partnership and investment in Exsentio. So that's how you can use Health Tech Alpha to get a lot more information on what's going on in health systems. And I'm going to jump back into presentation. And we can look at the last piece of information here on the portfolios, and that's the share of portfolio companies with an evidence signal greater than 40. Because we have very deep profiles on all of our ventures, right? We look at how much evidence do they have that their solution is bringing a benefit to the patients. And using that, we look at clinical trials, we look at regulatory approvals, and we look at peer-reviewed publications. And we say if a venture has an evidence signal greater than 40, that means they either have 1 clinical trial under their belt, they have 1 regulatory filing, or they have multiple peer-reviewed publications. And what we see is Mayo Clinic, almost half, 42% of their portfolio has significant clinical evidence. So that's showing that they are putting emphasis on ventures that have some sort of clinical evidence that their solutions bring benefits to a patient. Now, Julian, is that something that was discussed or that you've talked with health systems about at ViVE? Is that importance of showing benefits of solutions?
I mean, certainly the whole mentality and mindset has shifted since in the last 12 to 18 months from my engagement at HRTH last November, for example, in Las Vegas, and then prior to that. I mean, since we come out of COVID and since the funding environment has slowed to the point of getting quite dislocated, emphasis on proof points is significant. And so there is much more emphasis on the venture's ability to demonstrate or prove that it can achieve or do what it's clinically claiming to be doing. And therefore, a big emphasis on that. And so the days of lovely stories and ample funding are definitely behind us. And the next question, of course, after clinical evidence is what's the reimbursement pathway that particular venture or solution for that venture can actually achieve. And as you can imagine, that's a bit of a catch-22, of course, because some of these reimbursement pathways need to be, in the Europe, certainly need to be more sort of government regulated. And in the US, of course, you need the insurers and payors to come into play. It's interesting to note that tension because the CEO of Pear Therapeutics was only 2-3 days ago bemoaning the fact that insurers were not reimbursing the Pear Therapeutic solution, a well-known DTX, and therefore they have found that as a result very painful because there's much promise in the system about the solution and much praise, but when the patient wishes to use it or the HCP wishes to prescribe it, there's an affordability question immediately.
Yeah, absolutely, and that has, of course, the evidence has a lot to do with what kind of solution you're bringing to the market. And I believe if I look, my next slide is what we talk about here is that the evidence signal, these proof of the solution, right, depends a lot on which strategic area you're in. Prevention wellness solutions or few of the ventures have any sort of evidence, whereas diagnosis, treatment, research grow, of course, in the importance of having that evidence. And then looking through the digital health clusters, right? At Galen Growth, we have taxonomy, how we classify the solutions of the ventures. Of course, remote devices and clinical trial type of solutions for remote devices and clinical trials have the greatest proportion of partnerships have evidence in those two areas. Of course, if you have a remote device, it has to be approved. And then research solutions followed by wellness, which includes wearables, by the way. So depending on what strategic area you're in, you need more or less evidence in order to manage to get those partnerships. And Julian, it's probably a good time to address the first question that we have, saying at what stage of growth should European ventures look to scale to the US? And when we look through the portfolios, and you can see in the presentation, you have the different portfolios of the large health systems, and you can see the average alpha score, right, of those portfolios to see the approximate or the average maturity of a venture. That's actually getting the partnerships. But in the detailed or in the full report, you see anything, and this is not quite maturity, but looking at the funding stage of the ventures that are partnering with US health systems. They're going from Series A or even early stage funding all the way through Series D and exited ventures, right? So there's a huge variety. You can't really say what's the sweet spot. There are the research hospitals are partnering with very young ventures in order to get the solutions into the market. And you see a lot of large health systems, or several of the large health systems, 15 of them to be exact, are partnering with, for example, accelerators and partnering with VCs in order to try and get that early stage solutions to get them to generate clinical evidence, right, and actually bring solutions into the market. So there's a wide variety, and you can get at any point you can jump over into the US. But keep in mind, what you don't have listed are the European health systems, right, hospitals and health systems. And for example, Charité in Berlin, they took number 4 spot as far as the number of partnerships with digital health ventures, right? So there are opportunities to get your feet wet here in Europe and then go over to the US, market, or certainly at any point to jump into the US market and try and get a partnership there with the health system.
True. I mean, it's a bit of a push and pull, as we know. Europe is very fragmented. Success in one market doesn't not necessarily mean success in another market. And therefore, you are in that situation where if you've done well in country, or you're doing well, sorry, in country A in Europe, do you then try and grow into country B, a Dr. Lid type model? Or do you actually say, I'll continue strengthening country A Europe, but I'll move to the US next? One of the pieces of feedback, if you talk to, say, Nawal Roy from Holmusk, who went from Singapore and moved to the US, or to, say, Kuldeep from Bioformia, who did the same thing, one of the main drivers was scale and getting scale through health systems. But they will tell you that funding is very necessary to achieve this. But a lot of European ventures, digital ventures, quickly find themselves in that, what I call that Series A abyss, which is that they benefited from a lot of local stroke European type public funding until they get to Series A, and then they are very reliant on the private markets, which are still in Europe small versus the US. So it kind of swings and roundabouts. So the answer is, as soon as you can prove the answer, I guess my guidance is that as soon as you can prove, at least clinically, that you can do what you're doing well, then it's a time to start knocking on doors in the US.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get a little bit more into the characteristics of the ventures that are partnering with US health systems. We don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to skip over this slide. But this, if you look at this in the report, you'll see what are the must-haves for the small digital health portfolio sizes, right? The health systems that only have 3 to 4 ventures, right? They have to have teleconsultation. Disease management, right, is on the top of their list, as well as the health management systems, prescriptive analytics. Whereas if you go to the larger portfolios, then they start jumping into digital therapeutics, right? So this shows you, it gives a spectrum of, what are the must-haves for small portfolios versus what you can achieve with the large portfolios. But looking at the therapeutic areas, right? The disease agnostic ventures, which are the health management solutions, teleconsultation, of course, has the top number of partnerships, but that's followed by oncology, women's health, cardiovascular disease, right? So a large spread, I think, in the therapeutic areas for the different partnerships that you have, and what you see are the clusters, what you would expect to see as the top clusters within each of the therapeutic areas. And finally, what we're going to hit up on a little bit, Julian, at the end is that the venture funding downturn, right? Because now we see, okay, there's perhaps less venture funding available. We see a lot of VCs that are struggling. What does that mean exactly for US health systems and the partnerships that they've built up, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a health system, are you going to be faced with, half of your portfolio collapsing because of funding stress? And actually, US health systems should be in a pretty comfortable position because what you see is 40% of their ventures have raised in the last 12 months. So, and then nearly half of them have raised in the last 18 months. So that should give them enough runway to keep going for quite some time. But there is certainly a portion of their portfolio that likely hasn't raised in the last 2 to 3 years that might really be in trouble and might really have to struggle to find funding in order to keep going. Do you have what have you found, Julian, as far as I know you looked into this recently, the funding strength of ventures, and is this going to be a problem for US health system?
So listen, we're running out of time, so I can't go into the full detail. In fact, we've actually uncovered quite a bit now on this. So we will be looking to publish a specific, let's say, mini report at the end of the month on what is happening in digital health funding, or should I say funding stress. Your chart shows it really. The number of ventures across the globe that have raised in the last 18 months is in the minority, and it varies enormously between Europe and the US. The US is in a better position, and again, it varies very much between East Coast and West Coast, where the East Coast is in a better position than the West Coast. But we'll get into that detail later on in the month. It's fair to say that I didn't get a sense of great deal of concern at ViVE 2023 around funding, which I didn't know whether it was wishful thinking or people just trying to ignore the problem. Certainly, the Silicon Valley Bank failure has had an impact. It's dislocated VC, let's say, conveyor belt. And it's creating liquidity challenges. We certainly know that some of the bigger US VCs are currently running around the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, talking to all the sovereign wealth funds, trying to get liquidity. So it's not a happy place if you're a VC. And they're under pressure to deliver some returns. So what you're describing is certainly coming home to roost and will cause problems down the road. I don't know what that means from a CVC perspective, and which of those health systems' own funding mechanisms may be able to step in and help. But certainly, ventures will be forced to focus on cost cutting and to look at ways of raising funds, knowing full well that there will be flat rounds, as in no movement in valuation, or even down rounds, as in discounts on valuation. But we'll get into all that detail at the end of the month. But to us at Galen Growth, this is a concerning landscape as we move into 2023.
Yeah. Okay. So that gives me the conclusion of what I wanted to cover. There is one more open question, Julian, and that's asking about the common themes across European ventures that successfully managed to partner with US health systems. We didn't analyze in particular that particular question and look at the characteristics of the European ventures, right? We looked at, of course, as a broad term, what do ventures in general have, that you can find in the report. One thing that definitely stuck out was that these ventures partnering with US health systems have an extraordinarily high team score. So they have a very strong executive team, which if you're dealing with the large US health systems, you have to have a pretty thick skin, I think. Julian, you talked to some of the people at ViVE. It's probably not an easy road, but certainly one that can be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, listen, only thing I would add to that is, people with on this call and people watching the recording later on can easily get into HealthTech Alpha, look for the health systems, look for the European ventures in their portfolio, and look for themselves for the characteristics. We have our own evidence scores, signal scores that give you an idea of the strength of the venture, the funding, the team, the partnerships, etc. So you'll very quickly get a flavor of some of the key trends there. So it's a great question. It's not one that we have time to get into detail, but certainly the data is there in HealthTech Alpha to give you a very strong idea, or indicators, let's say, of what a typical European venture that has got traction with the US health system look like.
Absolutely. Great. So any closing remarks, Julian, or
So I'm conscious of time, and I thank everyone for their time with us today. I think we've addressed all your questions. Just in case you've got any other questions you want to ask, please feel free to use the Q&A button and flag your question quickly, and we'll try to answer it. As I said, it was just a snapshot of the full report. We were keen to bring it to life, share with you some of the importance we believe it exists for digital health ventures that are born in the in Europe and looking to the US as a scaling strategy. We also wanted to make sure that you had some of our first-hand takeouts from the ViVE 2023 event, or conference, sorry. Next report's coming up. You will find that we published yesterday a mini report on the Massachusetts Boston ecosystem, Well worth a read, even if you're not sitting there yourself as a startup. But it's certainly interesting to see the clear differences between East Coast and West Coast, and between Boston and say New York. So certainly have a look. I know that Sarah is actively working on a summary of Q1 2023. What are some of the key trends in the last 3 months? And I can tell you, it has been a very bumpy ride, and certainly seems to be setting the tune and the tone for an interesting 2023 rest of year. And as I said, we will also be getting into more detail looking at funding stress as a whole in digital health across the globe. Everything that we share with you is data driven. It is no hype, no bias, deliberately, and it is therefore entirely powered by Health Tech Alpha, which is the world's leading digital health data intel insights platform, and you can access for free yourselves. I don't think any other questions, Sarah. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your insights. And I hope everyone from this call at least has taken one key message, which is US health systems and European digital health ventures definitely mix. Thanks, everyone.